Hey everyone, Producer Dave here. Check out our other podcasts. We have The Plex, our flagship show, which is a weekly news roundup. We have Local Love, which is interviews with local Bay Area bands. Speaking of local, we also have Down Ballot, which is our Bay Area local news podcast. And we have How the Tech Are You, which is obviously a tech podcast. Enjoy the show.
I know how to stand up to a man. I'm defenseless against that kind of female insanity.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch at twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. We're also simulcasting to a couple other places. If you're watching at one of the places we're simulcasting, I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can make your own decisions. What the fuck are you doing over there all by yourself? Anyway, I'm Producer Dave. You can find me on Grindr, and I'm not sure what's going on with my soundboard. Let's see if it got fixed here.
You fucking leave me alone.
Okay, cool. It was fixed. Did you hear it at the beginning? It was like, roll, 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 which is like me when I have to end the show. Like late at night. Anyway, what's up, HK? Introduce yourself.
I am HK Perrin. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin at port87.social. And you can find me on email at hperrin at port87.com, which is my own email service. Feel free to sign up. It's awesome.
Fantastic. Can you find the gain knob and turn it up a little bit?
Even more? You have me turn my gain up like every single time. How's that?
That's better. That's better.
It's almost maxed out now.
That's amazing. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's Pulse Audio, or if you're using, maybe it's maybe it's the browser or something. Something's going on where because it was low. Anyway, it's fine now. This is the number one podcast of audio adjustments live on the air. This is the flagship podcast of audio adjustments live on the air. I found the worst thing. You can see it on the screen.
Oh gosh.
I found the worst thing.
Oh Jesus.
You want to tell everybody what I found?
So apparently Jordan Peterson and Tony Robbins had a talk, and I guess we're going to suffer through that now.
Yeah, it's Jordan Peterson on the Tony Robbins show. So, yeah, I don't know.
I didn't even realize Tony Robbins had a show.
He does, and now our fake YouTube account is subscribed to it. So we get all kinds of fake information on how to get rich and learn about what yet another alleged sexual assaulter is doing. Let's get started. I'm not happy about this, but I mean, we do this exact show, and we were trying to stay away from the same usual suspects. So we're doing about half of that right now. Maybe after this, to clear our palate, we'll watch a show about a boat because they have a new version of it.
There isn't anything that can stand up against the truth. And I mean, I believe that, I think, to some degree, because it just seems self-evident. It's like, if the truth is deeply reflective of the structure of reality, the claim that the lie can dominate is the claim that the unreal can defeat the real. And that's, you are literally insane if you believe that.
He's a clinical psychologist and a professor and a best-selling author, but I think the greatest thing about him is his...
He was a clinical psychologist, doesn't he? He doesn't practice anymore, right?
Right. He's a talk show host now, which is a fine thing to be.
Yeah.
Unless you're Jordan Peterson or Tony Robbins.
He just will not bullshit about things. He tells the truth and he digs in.
That's
and
not
he's
true.
willing to look for the truth. He doesn't believe he just has it, but he also...
The music behind this makes it sound like it's Jordan Peterson's funeral. No such luck,
What I
though.
really wanted to chat with us about today
I don't know
is
if it's
in
the
middle of all this
lighting, like if they
chaos,
don't have the
chaos.
white balance right. I mean, the white balance looks right. You can see the flowers, they look normal, but like his skin is like extra tan and it almost looks orange.
You
I think
know,
it might be a fake tan.
it might be.
There is a larger order, and the large order can be found by studying the stories of humanity. You know, the hero's journey is one of those stories. And perhaps, you know, he studies all the great religious texts, but he's been doing a whole series, some of you may have seen on the Bible, different portions of the Bible. Please help us welcome our friend, amazing soul, Dr. Jordan Peterson, everybody. Give it up for him.
There's not really an audience there, is there?
Jordan, thanks for joining us.
Oh, there is.
Hey, it's good to see you.
What is it with all these
Jordan's not even there in person.
No, but what is it with all these motherfuckers and their camera angles, dude? Why can't any one of these rich people get their camera like pointing down at like a 10 or 15 degree angle, like a fucking like they're trying not to have it look up their nose? It's gonna be terrible.
Thank you for that introduction.
Why even have a live audience if the guest isn't even there?
I'm not sure that the applause is actually from the live audience too, because it sounded like he was in an arena. I think he's Constantining this.
Well, I think we'll take off from that intro. The first thing I should let everybody know, this is a conclusion that people have come to across a variety of different disciplines.
What's up with his video too?
Literary criticism, computer intelligence.
Like, see, like his eyebrows, how there's like purple, you know, almost like the stuff that you'd put under your eyes if you were a baseball player, like dark. You see this?
I think he's got like a weird light pointed at him. Like it's not shining white light. It's shining like maybe he's got one of those RGB lights that creates like pseudo white by having like a red, green, and blue LED.
Now you're fronting me off.
Robotics, study of perception from the physiological perspective, a real coming together of observations across multiple disciplines. And so
Both of
here's
these
the
dudes look terrible in their
fundamental
video, though.
Realization.
Yeah. Let's not get distracted by that, though.
We have to see the world through a story. In fact, if you describe to someone the structure through which you see the world, what you're actually doing is telling them a story. So
I'm sorry,
here's
what
way
was
to
the
think
question?
about it. When you go see a movie,
This is like you just dropped right in the middle of one of his rants, right? Like he'd he'd even say hi or I'm Jordan Peterson or anything like that. He's just like, oh, we're gonna talk like just like right,
No banter.
just like fucking zero to potato in like fucking 1 second.
you emotionally. And the reason that happens is because the filmmaker, the writers, provide you with some insight into the goals of the characters. And when you can adopt someone else's goals, you can align your emotions with their emotions. And that means that you can feel what they feel, and that means that you can understand them. And so,
But I don't understand what the fuck you're talking about.
if you
I think he's just defining empathy, which is weird. I don't know why.
mimic them, you can mimic their nervous system with yours. that, and you have that feeling of being in sync with someone or in tune.
Right, but why is he talking about that? Like he was the guy who just introduced him, and he's like, glad to be here, and then just dropped like I said, it's like half an hour into one of his other videos, just fucking clicked on. Is he even did he is this like even real time? Like, or is this like, did he just record what he thought the responses would be, and some producer is just playing them?
I don't even know.
Someone.
The title of this video is most people learn this too late in life.
So not only do we have to see,
there was no indication of what that was,
but the story that we see the world through determines how we respond to things emotionally. So this is a useful thing to know. You know, if the world is unfolding for you in a manner that you don't find particularly acceptable.
So most people, when they're talking about like how people see things differently, like everyone, you know how like you'll say like everyone's the hero of their own story, right? You know, you see things differently, despite, you know, the fact that the phrase I just used calls it this. Most people don't call that a story. They call it a perspective. Like everyone has their own perspective on life. And I don't know why he's calling it a story here, but because what he's describing is just perspective.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just very confused as to what he thinks he's responding to, if I'm being completely honest. I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck he thinks he's talking about, because you'd think he'd be like half an hour into something, and he just came in hot with whatever this is. Or lukewarm, maybe.
Hurt and hopeless. One possibility is that you're not looking at the world through a particularly productive story. Now, once you understand that you have to look at the world through a story, or that it's inevitable that you will, another question immediately arises, which is, well, what story do you or should you see the world through? And that's the subject of great debate. In fact, the whole cultural war that we're in at the moment, that's turning everything into a kind of chaos, is actually a debate between the promoters of different stories. Now, that's
such a weird way to say it.
And neo-Marxist types, they tend to insist either that all our stories are fragmented and subjective and hedonistic at their base. There's no such thing as an overarching, uniting narrative. That was the claim of the French postmodernists. Or there's an alternative claim, which is that the only story that really unites people, the only story that really exists, is one of power, and that you can see the whole world as a reflection of the competition between different stories of power. So when you hear the Marxist types, for example, make the claim that
are we the
culture
Marxist
is nothing but an oppressive patriarchy, and that marriage is an oppressive institution, and that all economic relationships are merely those of exploitation, you're hearing an insistence that the only story that people can live out is the story of domination and oppression and victimization and mutual exploitation. It's an unbelievably dismal view of humanity. It also justifies the use of power.
Are we the Marxist types? Because I don't necessarily believe all those things he said. Some of them, yeah, I would agree with.
His also just his number of stories seems rather limited. It basically, he's like the French postmodernists believe that everything's like disjointed and there's no overarching narrative of humanity. I actually tend to believe a version of that, right? That like everything is kind of disparate, discrete, and that humanity doesn't have one single overarching narrative, because that would actually be quite boring.
Yeah, I think maybe he meant like those people believe that everyone views the world in some sort of biased way, which I would 100% agree with that. There's not a single person on the face of this earth who does not have biases.
The other thing that I just don't think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about, like the idea of these narratives. I don't think that, I think it's largely useless except for to fill podcast time.
Which some say is the best use of our time.
Long form podcasting. That's right. It's going to save the world.
For the people who put forward the story, because if there's no motivating ethos other than domination, then it's perfectly reasonable for you to use nothing but domination in your attempts to deal with other people. Now, that's a very pathological story. I would also say, by the way, it's a very counterproductive story. You know, you might say that people who wield power can become remarkably successful. You could point to dictators, for example, like the man who runs North Korea, and say, well, Dr. Peterson, you claim that power isn't a very productive story and that it doesn't work very well in the long run. But if you look at brutal societies like North Korea, you see that people who are perfectly willing to use power rise to the highest positions. How can you describe that as anything other than success?
Except that that's not how that person got to that position because of they were born into that position. It's not their exercise of power. It was they were born to the person who had already occupied that position.
And I would say, just because you're the biggest devil in hell doesn't mean that you've won the game. In fact, quite the contrary. And you can attain a position of dominance through force, but if you don't think you'll pay a price for that, you're a bloody fool. Alexander Solzhenitsyn did quite a nice job of investigating the psychological state of Joseph Stalin, for example. And Stalin was clearly the most powerful man in the world's most corrupt country, which made him the biggest devil in that particular form of hell. And
these guys quit talking about the Gulag Archipelago. It's like they never read it, I swear.
Well, what did he gain for his trouble? And I can tell you what he gained. It was that every single person around him lied about absolutely everything all the time. He had no true friends. He just had sycophants who wanted to be near a bully. He distrusted
We haven't seen
everyone.
Tony in a while.
He had contempt for everyone, of course, because he was so
He
terrible.
laughed. He was like, fuck it, I can phone this one in.
Like we're about what, maybe a sixth of the way through this video.
Yeah, we're at eighth of the way, I think.
No questions have been asked. Tony seems to have checked out.
I mean,
We don't know.
I mean, if there's one
The
thing that
audience
guy
probably
knows
left.
how to do is make money, I suppose. So if he's just like, well, I'm going to get the clicks regardless, so I'll just let this crazy person talk. I mean, I can see where that would be a good strategy.
People conducted themselves atrociously around him. He engaged in a variety of quasi-genocidal enterprises. He was a murderous thug, and he ended up likely murdered. And, it isn't obvious to me at all that any of that constitutes success. And so that's the typical outcome of strategies that are based on power. It's not.
Someone should make up a saying for
Now, you
that.
can think
Something
about
like,
this in your own life,
I don't know, live by the sharpened piece of metal, die by the sharpened piece of metal.
Oh, if only there was if only that was an existing concept.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying like somebody should make up like a term for the podcast host doesn't say anything. He just lets the guest ramble on like a fool.
Maybe
But yeah, take it. You got to hand it to Jordan Peterson for the ability to take a common saying like "live by the sword, die by the sword," and not only present it as if he's the first ever person to think about that, but also present it giving no additional information, but taking like half an hour to say it.
Right, and giving you far less understanding of the saying than if he just said the original one.
Yep.
And manipulative means to get to where you want to go, and maybe you think that's necessary. But
Sir, you're talking to Tony Robbins.
You don't want to have a marriage where the fundamental relationship is one of power, where one of you is a tyrant and the other's a slave, and maybe you alternate roles, but
don't
there's no
kink shame.
reciprocity or mutuality there. There's no genuine love and regard. There's just force. And you certainly don't want friendships that are predicated on that presumption. You want to be around people who want to be around you, not people that you forced or otherwise enticed or manipulated into being around you. And then on the business front, many of you are very successful. And those of you who are properly successful know perfectly well that the way that you establish a business that has a good probability of surviving into the medium and long term is to make contracts with the people that you work with that are to your mutual benefit, right? So your interests are aligned.
That's
so
not
that
how
you're
that works
thrilled
at
to be
all.
working together, and then to offer your customers genuine service and value for the money.
So I bet Tony Robbins treats his employees like shit, and his core brand proposition is that of like an influencer, a scammer, he's an influencer essentially. He was an influencer before there were really influencers. That's all he is. Jordan Peterson is describing exactly the opposite of what Tony Robbins has done to gotten himself rich.
And none of that's about exploitation, and none of that's about power. It's a completely different ethos. And so you might ask yourself, well, if you're going to characterize the ethos that isn't power, that unites people, that stabilizes them psychologically and provides for social unity, how would you characterize that? And Tony made some reference to this, and there are archetypal themes that echo throughout human history that detail out the fundamental story of life. And one of the most fundamental of those, there's probably two. There's an adventure story and a romance story, but I'll start with the adventure story.
Those are the two.
And the adventure story is essentially the myth of the hero.
Somebody in chat made a good point. Jordy Pete's been talking uninterrupted for about 8 minutes and hasn't started crying yet. So that's something.
As soon as he starts thinking about incels, then he'll start crying. Won't somebody think of the poor incels?
The individual.
Of the hero, which is, by the way, is the story that our culture, Western culture, is predicated on, and I would say all functional stories, posits that
our culture is predicated on the story of the hero. What
is this fucking? What are these fucking? What is this, like a fairy tale? The hero fairy tale, and it's like I can't think of a fairy tale about a hero, but it's like the Rapunzel is a love story and a hero story, right? Rapunzel, like what is he talking about? These are not like there's like more stories besides the hero story and the love story. This is like a very, very dumb analysis of society and narrative.
And how is our culture based on the hero story? Like, what does that even mean?
I mean, there's things about our culture, sure, that are based on like a hero story. Like, when we talk about the Revolutionary War or whatever, it is a story of the heroic Americans fighting off the British or whatever. And then like a love story, I don't know. Maybe it's, nope, everything I'm coming up with is inappropriate.
Automatons or clockwork machines that are driven by deterministic functions, but creatures that constantly...
I would say that our culture is based on flawed people doing the best they can.
What you might describe as a transforming horizon of possibility. So imagine, when you get up in the morning, what confronts you, your consciousness, is not so much the furniture in your room and the things that you can see that are right in front of you, but the possibilities of the
raccoon
day.
that got through the open window.
The possibilities of the day open up as that vast domain of potential occurrences.
What confronts me most of the days when I wake up is, well, fuck, here's the part of doing this I don't like. I have to like edit video and put out an audio podcast of something. And then after that, maybe I can make some cool t-shirts.
What confronts me is usually like a cup of coffee.
That you can play some role in determining. You're going to be thinking about the problems that you have that need to be solved, and you're going to be thinking about the opportunities that beckon to you that you could, in principle, take advantage of and utilize, if you have any sense, to your medium and long-term advantage, and simultaneously to the advantage of the other people around you.
So that's a long way of saying what confronts you is, what do I have to do today?
Yeah.
What's on the agenda for me today?
Man, I swear this guy can talk for like, I don't think there's a limit. He could just talk forever about the mundanest of things.
And so you're contending with a realm of possibility, and you shape that with your vision. And the way that that's portrayed in mythologies of the hero
Shape
is
that
generally
with your
some
vision.
motif that's analogous to that of a dragon fight. And so you can think about St.
It's like
George
Pete's
in that
dragon.
regard, and the ancient story is something like this. It's the story of The Hobbit, by the way. It's the story of The Lord of the Rings. It's the story of Harry Potter. It's the story.
Wait, hold on. Pause this for a second. So what he's saying is, like, when I get up in the morning and I think about what I'm going to do that day, that is analogous to the Lord of the Rings?
I mean, for him, it might be. Who knows what the hell's going on in this guy's head, dude?
But he's saying, like, just thinking about it, just deciding what to do that day is analogous to the story of the Lord of the Rings.
Like today, I had
absolutely
to decide,
not.
Today, I had to decide: was I going to go acquire some caffeine first, or make biscuits and gravy first? And it was almost like that movie, The Never-Ending Story. In that, I just went back to bed.
I mean, does he mean just that, like, the people in these stories had a decision of, like, whether to, like, go on the adventure? Because not all the stories are actually up to the hero, first of all. And second of all, yeah, people make decisions. Okay, cool. When people make the decision to stay home and watch TV, it generally doesn't make a good book.
Because it's deeply embedded in the biblical corpus. It's Star Wars. It's everywhere. This story is that.
Except that Star Wars is an allegory about fascism, and you would be the bad guy. You would be one of the bad guys in Star Wars, Jordy Pete.
There's a city, and it's threatened by the emergence of ancient chaotic forces that were once under control. And a hero emerges who notes the onset of this threat and who decides to step outside the bounds of the city and confront this creature, dragon often. And a dragon, by the way.
Well, in a story with a dragon, yeah, the creature is often a dragon. But in a story without a dragon, Jordy Pete, there are actually other enemies that the hero has to fight. It's not just a dragon. And
sometimes the dragon isn't the enemy. Sometimes you bring a donkey along and the donkey ends up fucking the dragon.
That's a little bit weird. I think Kevin Swanson had a famous screaming about that, actually. Was that How to Train Your Dragon?
No, that was Shrek.
Oh, okay.
You remember the end Donkey and the Dragon had like a bunch of babies and they were like half donkey, half dragon?
No, I don't remember that.
Dragon is a symbolic representation of a predator. You know, people say there's no such thing as a dragon, but it's an imaginary creature. It's like, that's actually not true. What a dragon is an amalgam of the features of the creatures that have classically preyed upon human beings. So
an imaginary creature.
Yeah, that's imaginary. That it doesn't have to be brand fucking new in the universe to be imaginary. I can think of like a green-skinned person, and even though there are things with green skin and there are people, that's still imaginary. What the fuck?
I don't know. Is DJ Bob a person? Or actually, no, that's actually a stuffed animal, and I need to like disabuse myself of the idea that it is sentient.
A predatory bird and a predatory cat and a predatory reptile and the destructive force of fire all combined. And so dragon and predator, dragon is the image of predator. And the ancient human idea is that our consciousness...
It's been almost 12 minutes since Tony Robbins said anything. The easiest interview.
Oh,
you just be like, speak. And then just fucking go about your business, make your phone calls.
So our heroic consciousness is that which moves out into the world to confront the eternal predator and to overcome it. Now, we obviously do that because we can protect ourselves and our children from predatory beasts. We can also protect ourselves from predatory people, and we can protect ourselves from the predator that lurks in our own heart. That's more of a spiritual twist on the classic St. George and the Dragon story, let's say, which is in variant forms the oldest story that
or it could be clogged arteries.
The idea? Well, the eternal dragon of chaos always threatens the habitable city.
Oh no, the chaos dragon. Oh no, in Maps of Meaning, the diagram with the chaos dragon, he's referring back to that. It's the worst diagram I've ever seen. If anybody wants, just look it up. If you're listening on the podcast or you're watching live or whatever, just look up Jordan Peterson chaos dragon diagram. It's terrible.
Alert, and who are acting in accordance.
So is he saying that like every story that has an adversary is analogous to a dragon?
I don't know. I hope so.
Okay.
Become aware that such a threat exists and then decide to confront it voluntarily. And that's the image of the knight, let's say armored knight, confronting the dragon in its lair. Now, interestingly enough, it's classically the case that predatory beasts, dragons, let's say, hoard treasure. They also hoard virgins, strangely enough. And the reason they hoard treasures...
What?
Oh, man.
I have not heard of this. What?
Even Tony Robbins is even probably sitting there going, oh, no, what the fuck is going on here?
Dragons hoard virgins? What?
I guess so.
Where did that come from? I have never heard that in my life. Dragons hoard gold. What would they do with virgins?
Well, I mean, in all reality, what would a dragon do with a bunch of gold?
Sleep on it?
Yeah, I guess it's comfortable. It's softer than other metal.
Is quite straightforward. It's because that which you most need to find is always lurking where you least want to look. That's a good leitmotif for life. So you could imagine that there are things in your life that you're avoiding that you know you should do, that you don't want to confront, that frighten you, that activate your predator detection systems.
Yeah, that's why we didn't watch this video last week in the post game, actually. It was something in my life that I knew I was going to have to confront, but I just didn't want to do it last week during the post game. So
So I think now he's saying if you ever procrastinate, you're doing it because you're afraid of dragons?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm having a rough time with this one. This is, I mean, it's not like, no, this is like 10% weirder than what I expected.
This is pretty wild.
Let's say, and if you can learn to organize yourself so that you have enough courage to take on that chaotic unknown, then you'll discover things about yourself and the world that you don't know and master them. And the consequence of that will be that you'll be rewarded. And that's, of course, the treasure that the dragon eternally guards. And the rule of thumb is fundamentally, well, the larger the dragon, the
you
more
might be rewarded. You might also get injured.
Or you might end up in the dragon's harem. Who knows?
If I was like, I've never tried heroin. I guess I've just always been afraid. Maybe I should go out and do heroin. I don't think I'll be rewarded for that choice.
You might feel like it the first time.
Yeah.
Of course, the treasure that the dragon eternally guards. And the rule of thumb is fundamentally...
It is funny that
eternal.
I would, I guess, be chasing the dragon at that point.
Guards. And the rule of thumb is fundamentally, well, the larger...
Is that
the
heroin?
dragon, the more
That saying comes from heroin, right?
I don't know.
The rule of thumb is fundamentally, well, the larger the dragon, the more likely you're going to get eaten. But by the same token, the larger the treasure. The virginal motif in that story is, the motif of the virgin is that women are, what would you say, deeply inclined to be attracted to male figures who are capable of taking on chaos and prevailing.
Or dragons.
So if you're the sort of person who can confront the
Girls love
unknown
dragons
in a visionary manner, and you can shape it into the cosmos that's habitable and good, then that also makes you maximally attractive as a partner. And that, as I said, that's the oldest story we know. In fact, the oldest written story we know is a Mesopotamian story called the Enuma Elish, where the main hero, Marduk, is in fact a St. George-like figure who confronts a dragon who threatens the entire world with destruction. And that's essentially the motif of most adventure stories. Sometimes the hero confronts a giant.
I mean, but like he's saying that like I think I know what he's doing. He's trying to talk to like young men who think, I'm struggling to find a girl. What do I need to do to find a girl? And what he's saying is like, oh, you just need to like confront literally any fear you have and like go out and accomplish something. And girls love a guy who's accomplished something. And that's just not true. Like if, let's say you did accomplish something amazing. Let's say like you I don't know, you like built a new kind of car that was like really, really good at fuel efficiency or something. I don't know. You did something actually really cool. If that's literally the only thing interesting about you, then like most people, not just women, but most people won't want to be around you.
So I'm not sure that he's necessarily doing that, but I can see where a person might think that. He's been talking a lot about like heroes and dragons. I feel like he missed his calling. He should be doing like YA graphic novels. Actually, he missed his calling.
But he's so bad at it.
Oh, okay, so it would be better for the world if he was doing YA graphic novels.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Dragon and the giant is usually a symbol of something like the corrupt state. So, there's two variants of heroes, and one variant of hero confronts chaos as such, just disorder and uncertainty, and the other variant of hero confronts corrupt gigantism. That's a good way of thinking about it, and that's another eternal enemy of human progress on the psychological and social front, right? The tendency of organizations to develop into tyrannical giants that have to be slain in order for proper order to be established. And so
16 minutes in.
That story of confrontation with chaos is extraordinarily deeply rooted in Western culture. You see it expressed in its most fundamental form, arguably, in Christianity.
Does he think that the Western culture is the only culture that has like the hero story?
Or dragons?
He keeps saying like, oh, that's the basis of our culture. That's how Western culture is so deeply rooted in Western culture. It's like, no, that's just rooted in humanity.
Right. There's
Like
always
humans tell stories of great adventure. Like that's what we do. That's almost like kind of the defining feature of our species.
Well, the fact that we can even tell stories in any sort of narrative way. But yeah, like this is weird because first of all, the dragon that he's bringing up is not of what a culture does not come from the West, right? Like,
correct. Yes. That does not come from the West. Yeah.
So this is all, even on its own terms, whatever terms those are, this doesn't make sense. He's wrong about the thing that he made up, that he invented something himself to be wrong about, which is pretty impressive, I gotta say.
Crucifix itself is a symbol of something like chaos. So imagine...
No, it's not. No, you had it a minute ago.
No.
The crucifix is a symbol of the power of the state.
Yeah, the government. Like that was how the government like executed people. That was how did he miss that?
Because he just
That's
talked
the
about
whole point of the story of Jesus.
Right, he just talked about the corrupt state like what feels like an hour ago, but I swear it was like a minute ago.
Wow. About this psychologically, one of the things you might ask yourself is, why have we collectively been gazing, for example, at this terrible figure of the crucifix for 2,000 years? And to get a sense of how shocking that is, imagine that the object of worship was a man hanging with a broken neck from a noose. It's exactly the same kind of image. It's an image of state-sponsored torture.
Okay, so he did. Okay, it took him a minute.
Of what would you say? It's an image of the sum total of all vulnerable possibilities. And so in the Christian story, the eternal Redeemer, who's in principle the model for behavior, is the person who voluntarily takes on the entire chaotic weight of existence. And so in Christ's passion, all the terrible things that can happen to any particular person are amalgamated together and form part of his catastrophic adventure. And so you could imagine in your own life, and this is...
I don't think that's true. The guy had one bad weekend.
Right. Then he came back.
Yeah.
But then he left.
Like, he was put to death, sure. that's not the only bad thing that can happen to you, and it's not the worst thing that can happen to you.
And like most of the rest of the story was him running around doing kind of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Maybe this motherfucker's never read the Bible. I don't know.
Well, what terrible things might happen to you? Well, you can be hurt physically, badly. You can be tortured, let's say. You can be put to death. You could be tortured physically and be put to death young. That could happen as a consequence of being betrayed. It could happen as a consequence of being betrayed by someone extremely close to you, let's say your best friend or your marital partner.
Or maybe by the hotel Wi-Fi.
It could happen because the state turns against you. It could happen because the state turns against you, even at the hands of your own people. And that could happen to you even if you were innocent. And so you can see that.
But hold on, the state didn't turn against Jesus. Jesus was against the state. Like, Jesus was essentially like telling people not to, telling people that the religion of the state was the wrong religion, and the state didn't like that.
Right. He was a criminal, according to the state.
Yes.
The entire time.
Like, the state didn't turn against him.
Well, I don't know. We didn't really hear much about his awkward teen years. Maybe he was a statist during his awkward teen years. Who knows?
But also, like, the state was not run by his followers. Like, it's not like he got betrayed by his followers. I understand that, like, the betrayal part, he meant Judas, but like, he also said that the state, like, the people who followed him were the ones that put him to death. No, they weren't. None of them were Christians. They were all Romans. Like, there may have been like a few Christians in the population, but the vast majority of the population was not Christian.
This is wild. I'm also impressed that Tony Robbins has been able to shut the fuck up for this long. Not that Jordy Pete can talk for this long, but that Tony Robbins has been able to shut the fuck up for this long. This is amazing.
I think Tony Robbins went out to lunch.
He literally, like, he's not out. He's like, oh, he's out to lunch. They're like, oh, you mean he's not paying attention? I'm like, no. I mean, he's ordering a Cobb salad right now.
Yeah, he actually went out down the street to the little bistro, got a salad, and now he's sitting right outside the bistro eating the salad. Well, it's only been 18 minutes. He's probably still waiting for the salad.
Unless it was one of them pre-made salads.
Oh, it could have been. Yeah, he could be eating it right now.
All possible fears. And the crucifix is an image of the sum total of all possible fears. And the reason that it's a redemptive symbol, at least in part, is because, and this is why there's a Christian injunction, let's say, to pick up your cross and stumble uphill with it, let's say, to pick up your cross and bear it. The idea is that you're going to be best prepared to take on the true difficulties of your life by confronting the potential existence of all of those problems before they make themselves known. Because why
is he saying that the cross is the sum total of all possible fears? Like, the cross just represents execution. Like, it's like the fear of death, the fear of like persecution, maybe the fear of like state control, maybe the fear of like loss of freedom, but that's about it.
Yeah, who knows? It'd be really interesting to talk to like a theologian, right? Like a well-read theologian from academia who would listen to this and kind of give their take on it, because I feel like they would probably find this ridiculous. But I don't think you have to be a theologian to think this is ridiculous. I just think that that particular take might be interesting, right?
Yep.
Resilient in your life, and that would mean less stress. That would mean less anxious, mean less subject to pain and depression and nihilistic thoughts, and more able to spring back when trouble visited you.
No, it's spring forward, fall back.
Could make yourself more resilient. Would be to envision, for example, how you would react to, well, perhaps bad medical news on your behalf or on the behalf of someone you love, or betrayal by someone close to you, including yourself, or being potentially mobbed and alienated by your social group or your ethnic group or your political group.
How do you betray yourself?
Being subject to the
I
tyranny.
mean, I think it's more metaphorical, right? It's like when you when you make like he's probably talking about like self-destructive behavior,
Okay.
like smoking and drinking and the things that
Doing
maybe
benzos?
maybe, but that was prescribed by. It was actually the psychiatric community that betrayed him.
of the state or your own weakness, to walk through that and to face that as a, what would you say, as a inevitable, likely reality, and to fortify your character in, what would you say, in preparation for that eventuality. And you could ask yourself, as sensible people, well, how the hell could it possibly be any different? You know perfectly well that you're not going to be prepared to confront anything that you avoid. Obviously, how can you prepare yourself to confront something that you're going to avoid? And given that you know that
Wait, what?
You could
your life is
prepare
going
to
be
avoid
rife
it.
with a set
Right, that would be a way to confront something, actually, right? Like, remember when we had Frost from Bullshido on? One of the things he said about a fight, he said the best way to prepare for a fight is to fucking figure out how to get away from the fight, right? Like,
There you go.
and that's a guy who's been in some fights, and he was just like, he's like that's the best thing to do, actually, is just run. He's like, don't fight people. He's like, that's bad. So you could prepare for a fight by being fast. Like, prepare for a fight by knowing where all the exits are.
So just to recap this video so far,
Good luck.
we're about 20 minutes in. Tony Robbins has not appeared since he was first on camera in the very beginning of the film.
What is this? A David? What is
video,
this? David?
fuck.
What is this? A David Fuller video where he's like, in this film?
I couldn't think of the word video for a second there.
That's because this guy's
so
scrambling
basically-
your brain. The Chaos Dragon has scrambled your brain.
Yep. In the past 20 minutes, we've discovered that everything is dragons, and you're all afraid to do everything, and that's why women don't want you.
of irreducible difficulties, how could you possibly be any better prepared than to face that beforehand and to understand that that's part of your destiny? And then even more to take...
I mean, hold on. So, like, you do have to prepare for something, even if you're avoiding it. Like, you could be avoiding it for, like, because you're not prepared.
Right. It's like a tactical retreat.
Or it could even be like, like I need to go and compete in a race, or I want to run a marathon. I'm not going to run the marathon tomorrow because I haven't trained, so I'll wait until next year and I'll train first. It would be a really bad idea, Jordan Peterson, to just go run a marathon without training.
Do you remember that movie, The Karate Kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, how he had to like wax on and wax. He was avoiding fights by training. He was avoiding the thing that he was preparing for because he was busy preparing for it. That's like,
And like telling people that they should just rush into everything without preparing for it is bad. Like, that's how you die.
voluntarily as something that you're not only willing to do, but maybe capable of learning to do, well, with, I suppose, in a spirit of radical acceptance, and maybe even now and then something approximating joy. It's a lot to ask for, right? That you have to maintain your moral compass and your hopeful optimism in the face of the worst that can happen to you. But what the hell's your alternative?
cynicism. It serves me well.
Not putting yourself in the situation that the worst could happen to you, maybe? Like by preparing or avoiding?
Right. What's it? Prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
If the chickens do come home to roost and things start to go badly for you, and you are terrified by that and embittered as a consequence, and then you turn away from what's positive and highest, all that's going to happen clearly is that your suffering is going to get a lot worse, and that you're going to distribute that suffering to the people around you. So, like, how in the world is that going to work?
Sir, I feel like you're distributing a lot of suffering to me right now.
And so the radical types, especially the intellectuals, they insist that, well, we can orient ourselves quite well with a kind of subjective hedonism. That's the hedonism of the moment and of subjective self-promotion, let's say. And more Marxist types insist that we maneuver through the world merely as a consequence of our imposition of various schemes designed.
Alan Bay in the chat, who just followed us, thank you, brings up a really good example of when it's very important to prepare and not just fucking go for it. Scuba diving.
Right.
If you do not prepare, if you don't, learn how to scuba dive properly, like let's say you have a fear of the ocean and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to go scuba dive. I'm going to take Jordan Peterson's advice. I'm just going to go out there and fucking do it. Not even try to prepare for this. Like, you will die for sure. 100%. You won't know what you're doing. You'll fuck something up and you will die. Like, scuba divers die when they're not prepared.
Right. Or if you're just, maybe your goal isn't necessarily scuba diving, but you'd like to see some underwater cave. And so if you don't even think about the idea of scuba equipment, then you just go into the underwater cave, 100%. You might see it once, but you should avoid that underwater cave until you learn to fucking scuba dive.
You'll see how it looks on the way in.
Yeah, and maybe as you die and you hallucinate, you'll see a dragon. Who knows?
All the power. But there's no evidence that a hedonistic orientation towards life works.
Ooh, perhaps checking out the Titanic was just said in the chat. I mean, they sort of prepared, but I don't even want to get into that.
That's why most of us mature beyond the state we're at when we're 2 years old. And there's no evidence at all that an orientation towards power and domination actually constitutes a good strategy psychologically or socially. So all that's complete bloody rubbish as far as I can tell. And I think there's endless evidence now gathered on all sorts of fronts to indicate that that's the case. And then you might say, well, as I mentioned before, what's the alternative? And the alternative is something like full frontal
nudity,
confrontation with the most dreadful elements of existence. So in the Christian story, I can take
full frontal confrontation with the most dreadful elements of existence. Okay, what exactly is he doing to the dragon?
I don't know. Sounds hot though. I mean, I'm not into it, but whatever.
Hot maybe if it were anyone else but Jordan Peterson.
Maybe he makes his wife dress as a dragon. Who knows?
In the Christian sense, is to take on the full catastrophe of vulnerable existence, right? To face the reality of death, to face the reality of torture and betrayal at the hands of friends, enemies, and the state. To understand that that's part and parcel of destiny. But it doesn't end there, and that's quite interesting too.
Well, this doesn't end ever.
Think that you've lived a very deep life or a very long life if you haven't come to understand at some point in your life that there are worse things than death and maybe worse things than pain. You can see this make itself manifest in people who develop post-traumatic stress disorder. People who have PTSD are generally not merely people who've been hurt by life.
People in the chat are like, what was the question? Is this an interview? Like, I swear Tony Robbins could have just said, this is Jordan Peterson talk. You'd be like,
that's basically what he did say.
There are people who've been touched by malevolence, and it's one thing to suffer, but it's another thing to suffer pointlessly at the hands of people who are doing nothing but trying to produce suffering. And that's not a bad definition of evil. And anyone with any sense who has paid any attention at all, for example, to the history of the 20th century, knows perfectly well that a sensible person clearly admits to the existence of evil. I mean, how else would you characterize what happened in Nazi Germany or in the Stalinist Soviet Union or in Maoist China?
So I feel like
now
this
in
right
North
here
Korea-
is where he and I would disagree about the definition of evil, because I feel like he's implying that like any sensible person will say that there are things that are like objectively evil, and I would disagree. I don't believe in objective evil. Evil is subjective.
Right. Even if there are things that we all agree or that almost everyone agrees is like evil behavior, or even people in history who've been evil, we're still making value judgments. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like to Hitler, the Nazis weren't evil. So evil has to be subjective, or else Hitler would have understood that what he was doing is evil. And maybe he did. That's a bad example because that's just one person. But like there are people who do evil things, not like do things that I would consider evil that they themselves don't consider evil. For example, Jordan Peterson does evil things all the time. I consider those things evil, but he doesn't.
I mean, if you don't think that's evil, then you don't attribute the same meaning to the word that I attribute to it, let's say. It's a stark reality.
That's exactly what I said, yeah. You and I have different definitions of evil, man.
Along with the contemplation of your own morality, is that you have to contend with the existence of malevolence. And the way that's laid out in the Christian story, which is a variant of the hero myth, by the way, the deepest variant of it, arguably, that you have to confront malevolence itself as well as mortal vulnerability.
I mean, he did say arguably.
All right. Well, arguably a beer is a sandwich.
In order to maximize your
bread.
resilience and, weirdly enough, to
maybe the metal can counts as bread.
You see,
we can argue about it.
With the insistence that
it's fully wrong, but we could still argue about it.
He not only died in some real sense and had to go through all of that, but also had to descend to the depths of hell itself and to encounter the deepest abyss of human
Did Jesus go to hell?
And I would say that's...
Yeah, he came back and said, oh shit, there's dragons down there. Gotta go. Bye.
I don't think Jesus went to hell when he died. I'm pretty sure the Bible doesn't say that. I haven't read the whole thing, but I'm pretty sure Jesus did not go to hell when he died.
It's also morally incumbent on us. I mean, this is a terrible thing to tell people, right? Because it really means that
he did go to... I'm wrong. Okay. Wow.
Could be.
He did go to hell.
The worst that there is to face. But then again, like I said, if you think about that like a sensible person for 15 seconds, you understand very quickly that you're not going to develop your character by shrinking away.
He had a wild weekend. Yep.
And you certainly aren't going to do that with your kids. You don't.
He went on a hellbender.
Listen, son, the best thing to do in life is to shrink away from everything that's difficult. Not if you're someone who actually loves your son and wants to encourage him. You say instead, look, kiddo, there's something within you that can respond to any challenge, no matter how deep.
No. Like a reasonable thing would be like, hey, you got to actually pick your battles.
Yep. And you got to understand your own limits.
Right. And yeah, I think understanding your own limits is part of the process by which you choose your battles. Because otherwise anything you don't like, you like a child, right? You like kind of lash out at anything you don't like. And, as you grow older, first of all, even as a child, you don't make many friends like that. If somebody does one thing you don't like and you call them a poopy head, well, then you're not going to have any friends.
Maybe you encourage him to take on the most abysmal challenges in the hopes that he could succeed and become who he could be. And that's the appropriate fundamental orienting story that
26 minutes in.
All healthy people and all...
At this point, if Tony Robbins talks the entire rest of this video, he'll be at about parity with Jordan Peterson.
States has to act out and interpret the world through. And that's very useful to know, right?
And keep in mind, Jordan has had
with chaos,
absolutely nothing so far.
And malevolence. That's the pathway to the eternal resurrection. That's the fundamental hero story. And that's the ultimate treasure. That's another way of thinking about it, right?
What's the pathway to the eternal erection?
By losing it. And there's nothing in that.
There's different kind of pills than the ones he was on.
Just true. Psychologically.
Unlimited Viagra.
Psychophysiologically and scientifically and theologically. And so, well, that's probably a good place to end that.
Well, it's been a long time.
It's as good as any other place. You didn't say anything. You could have ended in the middle of a sentence and it wouldn't have mattered.
That was spectacular. Exactly what we were wanting, talking about why all this occurs. There's a greater and higher purpose for it all. So we have
Wait, what's going on with his camera?
for Jordan, who's got some questions.
Also, what? He didn't say why everything occurs and that there's a greater and higher purpose for it. Like, that wasn't what he was talking about.
Also, this is
He was
great.
talking about confronting fears.
Watch this. This is great, by the way.
That was spectacular. Exactly what we were wanting, talking about why all this occurs. There's a greater and higher purpose for it all. So we have some questions for Jordan, who's got some questions out there, ladies and gentlemen.
I've
That's
got
not what
many.
he was talking about, though. He was talking about confronting your fears and going and doing something absolutely fucking stupid and probably getting yourself killed.
Also, dragons.
And dragons.
I hope somebody in the audience just says, "Could you summarize what you just said, Mr. Peterson?"
I mean, I just did. That was like the past 25 minutes. That's what he said. You should confront every fear you have, no matter what it is, no matter how dangerous and stupid it might be. You should go and do it. Maybe you'll get a big pile of gold. Probably you'll die. No, he didn't even say the probably you'll die. I'm adding that. Probably you'll die if you do that.
I have like 6,000 questions.
Wait, what the fuck is this? What do you mean? Why does his shirt say the Cayman? That's where all this guy's money is. That's why that says the Caymans on his shirt.
But I'll go with one. And just on a macro level, I have 3 older children. They're 23, 21, 19. I have an unbelievably blessed relationship with them. My son is my best friend in the world. So he goes off to college. My daughters go off to college. They are having incredibly high degrees of success.
My son,
I'm proud of them and
best friend in the world. Daughters, they're all right.
happy with how they've chosen their life path. But, Rand, there is just such an unbelievable dynamic through the social dilemma and through the professors that they experience on an everyday basis. So my question is, what do you do? What do you do? Like with this world, how do we protect our children, our loved ones at the highest level?
I think
From
you've
college?
already answered that question.
I like how Jordan didn't even let the guy finish talking. Watch.
Hold on.
Our loved
What did he mean? How do we protect our children? Like, he was talking about them going to college.
Well, he said there was a social dilemma, but he wasn't probably talking about that documentary about the social media. I think he's talking about woke professors. If I have to read between the lines here.
That makes sense.
ones at the highest level.
I think you've already answered that question in your question. I mean, you said, first of all, that you have a very good relationship with your children. So congratulations on that. You said they're out there in the world, making their way forward on multiple fronts simultaneously. They're doing everything they can to pursue the truth. That's what you do. And that doesn't mean that the victories that you attain are going to be obvious or easy. I do believe that there isn't anything that can stand up against the truth. And I believe that, I think, to some degree, because it just seems self-evident. It's like, if the truth is...
Okay, yeah, that is what he means. Because now he's talking about, truth stuff. And whenever they're talking about that, they mean, a professor, a college professor telling someone, yes, climate change is real, or no, sex is not binary, or you probably shouldn't misgender your trans fellow students. And if you do, you're going home.
The claim that the lie can dominate is the claim that the unreal can defeat the real. And that's, you are literally insane if you believe that.
Yes.
So...
Wait, who was that? It was a woman's voice.
If your children are doing what they can to live by and speak the truth, they'll find their way. And the beneficial consequences of that wayfinding may not be immediately obvious, but that's also partly why you need to have faith. Because here's a good way of thinking about faith.
So here, pause this right here for a quick second, because this, I have never understood, the kind of people who say oh, the truth will always dominate. You can't stamp down the truth. There's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't matter. He is a Christian, right?
Sure.
He would call himself a Christian.
I think so.
He thinks that that's the truth, which, fine, that's up to him. He does understand that is not the dominant perspective in the world, right? That like in a lot of the world, Christianity is only a very small minority. And in fact, other religions dominate.
Right. There is
Maybe not in his world, maybe not any of the places that he visits, but like in most of the world, Christianity is not the dominant religion. So like, how does he explain if he believes that Christianity is the truth and he believes that the truth, you can never stamp down the truth, that people will eventually figure that out, then how does he explain that Christianity is not the dominant religion everywhere?
Well, more importantly, there isn't one religion that 50% of plus one of people on the planet believe in anyway. So there is no dominant narrative or whatever, and that's fine actually. I'm okay with that. I don't know. It's weird. This is weird. Also, he's not even answering. First of all, he didn't even let the guy finish the fucking question because he was like, I haven't talked enough yet. So I don't know. Just tell your kid to fucking pretend the professor is a dragon and slay the dragon or some shit.
Faith in the truth. Well, but then if I tell the truth, I'm going to get into trouble. And then you might think, well, then I better not say what I have to say, or I better lie in this situation because otherwise there's going to be trouble. Well, that just means that you have misplaced faith in your current interpretation of trouble. Because a deeper faith says, and this is very useful to know, if you're telling the truth, whatever happens is the best thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Right. That's the statement of faith. So in the opening sections of Genesis, it's the
I don't think
word
that's
of God
true.
that creates habitable order out of chaos. And that's analogous to this process I described before of confronting chaos and
he's back to this.
generating order in consequence. Now, every time God uses truthful speech to create a new element of the world, he notes and repeatedly that this is good. Well, there's that process is also something that people can replicate, made as we are in the image of God. That's the thesis of the text. So the hypothesis there is that, well, if you're telling the truth, the world is laying itself out as it should. Now, you might not be able to see that because you're getting in trouble, at least in the short term, for what you have to say. But, there's lots of times.
You could also be hurting other people by telling the truth. Like, let's say you're like a spy and some information that could get some people killed. And you're directly asked that information by the enemy, whoever it is in this case. You probably shouldn't tell the truth.
Sounds like somebody else has been watching Burn Notice. Yeah. There's times when you withhold information because it could potentially hurt other people. It's not, you don't even have to you don't have to think very hard to imagine scenarios like that. Yours in intelligence gathering or, fucking spycraft, but also did this other person say this negative thing about me? You could go, I didn't hear that, because you don't want to get you know what I mean? You don't want to create conflict among people, so you just, even if that person did say something negative, maybe you just say, oh, I didn't hear anything about that. And now you're preventing a conflict in your fucking social group or at work. You gotta fucking withhold shit all the time at work. Why are you late? It's not like I decided to hit snooze. It's like, oh, there was traffic. I mean, what the fuck?
Do something that feels good right now and it isn't so good in a week. And there's plenty of times when the reverse is true. If you do something difficult now, it might get you in all sorts of trouble. And it turns out that in 2 years, that was the best decision you could have ever possibly made. Well, that's what the truth is like. It's like, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be.
Has there never been a time in his life where he did something difficult and then later regretted it?
That's statement of faith.
I can think of
this world is so fucking black and white.
I can think of a scenario in which he took the more difficult path and it didn't seem to work out for him very well. He disappeared for damn near a year and almost died.
And it sounds like you've already inculcated that in your kids. So I
think that was the easier path, though,
First,
right?
congratulations,
It was ostensibly, or it was supposed to be the easier path. Turns out it wasn't, and he almost died. But he thought it was the easier path, right?
Yeah, I don't know who. It's hard to tell. That story's a little convoluted. So, I'm just surprised you didn't come out of that joining Scientology, honestly.
Sit back to some degree and let it play out. Encourage them to continue doing what they're doing and watch. And don't assume that if things are going sideways from time to time, that means that, the whole game is lost. I found, for example, this very peculiar thing to have learned is that the people who have most viciously attacked me
have
done me the greatest favor.
Me. Oh, well, then unblock me on Twitter.
For 3 years to unfold, and it was quite brutal in the intermediary desert, let's say. But that's still how it inevitably worked out.
Thank you. Who's the next question?
Dr. Peterson, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Wait, where's this guy? Questions. I'm having a hard time believing that this was done in real time in any sort of meaningful way.
To talk to you. In your book, The 12 Rules for Life, this is kind of playing off of what Sean may have said, but rule number 8, you said, tell the truth or at least don't tell a lie. And so many times I find that, and you said there really are no atheists, just people who don't understand the God they serve.
Yeah.
And
but is this a question?
To myself, sometimes I find that a lot of people, one of Tony's coaches was talking to me once and he said, Michael, he goes, there's a difference between the truth and the whole truth. And that really dawned on me once. And some people tell the truth and exclude parts of things in life that shade the story.
Is that not, but don't we all know that? That's why they say it in court.
Yeah, that's all the whole truth.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Right. This has been covered.
Those are all different things.
Right.
Like you can tell the truth, but not the whole truth. You can tell the whole truth, but also tell untrue things. So you say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah,
did he never even think to process that when he first heard that statement?
I'm wondering if this guy's just never watched Matlock.
And I find that I do that with myself sometimes. And I was just curious if you could shade some light on that rule number 8. It really impacted
There's
me.
a couple of questions.
Shade some light?
I'll take that apart. So first of all, it's not a straightforward matter.
It's
to tell the
shed
truth.
some light.
Because what the hell do you know? We're all steeped in ignorance, right? Yeah. So none of us are, in the final analysis, capable of telling the truth. We can get better at approximating the truth with time, but we don't have full access to all knowledge, and so everything we say is going to be partial. Now, having said that,
even that's not true. There are things that I can say that are 100% true because they are fully dependent on how I feel.
Distinguish between what's true and what isn't. How do you start doing that? Well, someone might say, I don't know how to distinguish.
Someone might say, I don't know. Okay, cool.
What's true and what's not true in the final analysis. And I would say to them, yeah, but you'll find times in your life where you're inclined to say something or do something, to say something you know to be false or to do something you know to be wrong. Now, there may be times when you're ambiguous and ambivalent and you don't know, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those times when you actually know, and you can tell, because if you're going to say something that you know to be false, it fragments you internally and makes you weak. You feel what could be the ground under your feet shifting.
Or you just think to yourself, well, shit, now I got to lie. Right? I'm sorry.
Got to file away this lie so that I can recall it if this situation ever comes up again, and then build more lies on top of it.
Right.
Until I have a lie cake.
And I mean, hopefully most of our lies are what they call little white lies, where you don't have to construct a whole reality around them. But I swear to you, every adult encounters situations fairly regularly where they're like, well, shit, I gotta lie.
Yep.
It's not ideal, but it's just the human condition.
You're lying and you're betraying yourself. And I would say, and this was the purpose of that rule, was, well, stop doing that. First, stop doing that. Just stop saying all the things that you are saying that you know perfectly well to be false. And then at the same time, you can stop doing all the things you know that you shouldn't do.
Why, yes, honey, that dress
Well, what'll
does
happen
make
as
your ass look
consequences that
big.
your
I mean,
speech-
depending on the circumstances, maybe you're like, oh shit, yeah. They're like, does this make my ass look big? And you're like, yeah, fucking badonk. You know,
Yeah, if that's what she's going for, maybe do say that.
right? Or anybody, right? Anybody that wearing anything, does it make my ass look big? You're like, yeah, actually. And they're like, oh, thank you. I used to think my ass was flat.
will become more precise and your vision will become clearer because you're not cluttering yourself up with obvious falsehoods. And then if you continue doing that, your capacity to distinguish between what's true and what's false gets more and more sophisticated. And if you do that long enough, you might actually get to the point where you could actually start to tell the truth instead of just not lying. At least some truths, at least some of the time. You know, and that's a pretty good start.
I thought he just said that no one can ever tell the
across
truth.
time as you become
is-
expert at this. And then you might say, well, why bother doing that? And I can tell you why you should bother doing that. It's very straightforward. There will come a time in your life where you have to make a very fine decision. It might be one that your life depends on, or the life of someone you love, or a relationship depends on, or your business depends upon. And you'll be torn apart at the point where you have to make that decision. And if you can't rely on yourself at that moment to make the right decision, you could lose everything. Now, you might ask yourself, well, how do you ensure that you can rely on yourself in a situation like that? And I would say, well, if you spent 20 years practicing lying, you can be bloody well sure that when push comes to shove, you're going to make the wrong decision.
But again, like your example earlier of like somebody working in intelligence, like working in the field in intelligence, literally your job is to lie. You are a professional liar, possibly with a diplomatic cover. Like,
Yep. Also, why would anyone listen to what Jordan Peterson has to say on telling the truth?
yeah. His whole like thing is predicated on a lie about Bill C-16. That's his whole it's not like he wasn't known before that, but he blew up when he started lying about Bill C-16.
That, and also what I was thinking of is like he was telling people about like how to live their life and how to, you know, he was giving people all this advice while he was literally addicted to benzos.
Oh, he was on like an unreal amount of benzos while he was on stage saying that people who had drug addictions were, it was a result of their own moral failing. Like,
yeah. So literally, why would anyone believe what this dude has to say about truth?
You're going to want to be in a situation where your eye is clear and your tongue is sharp. And so if you've practiced diligently, one might even say religiously, to abide by the truth, then when you're cornered and the chips are down and you have to go left or right, and one of them leads up and the other leads down.
But that's not what left, never mind. This guy doesn't even understand two-dimensional space.
You're going to pick the right route. And if you know that, like if you meditate on that, if you understand that that's coming, that can scare you badly enough so that you'll stop saying things you know to be false. You'll pay the price for that. Then you add another interesting twist to that. You know, you said that often people, these are more subtle liars. They'll sort of half tell the truth. They'll tell the truth in a way that enables them to manipulate towards an end. Yeah, well, that's a particularly pathological form of lying. That's actually using the
That's
Lord's
like why
name
most
in
people
vain,
lie.
by the way. You know that famous commandment? Do not use the Lord's name in vain. That doesn't mean to not swear. It means do not pretend to be serving God when you're not. And that's that kind of lie that you described.
Isn't that what that
Telling the truth
means?
is a very tricky issue because
It's kind of
you
open-ended,
have
I
to be
suppose.
aiming up in all ways to ensure that what you're relating isn't manipulatively self-serving at some subtle level.
But like everything we do is probably self-serving at some level, or at least we think it is at the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
There are like selfless acts that people can do. But yeah, most of what we do is self-serving.
Even the things we think are selfless, we might be doing it because it feels good. You know, that's not nothing.
Well, I mean, like throwing yourself on top of a grenade is undeniably selfless. Like you're putting yourself in almost sure, like an almost sure death scenario to save other people. So that's like, you're not doing that for your own good.
You still think it's the right thing to do at the time. And
but that's still selflessness. You just think being selfless is the right thing to do.
A long time to orient yourself at enough levels simultaneously so that you're no longer playing those sorts of games. So, but you do that by practicing. You do that by practicing not lying. It's like, you try to make that a vow. And you can clear yourself up an awful lot. A lot of what you do with people in psychotherapy, a huge part of it, is you help them disentangle themselves from the web of lies that they found themselves trapped within. Decades of lies sometimes, or multiple lifetimes even, because you do see families from time to time that are so wrapped up in lies that it goes back 3 or 4 generations. It's just lies nonstop at every possible level. And
families that are full of compulsive liars, you say.
All of that has to be sorted out. And you often are doing that working as a psychotherapist. You can do that with a sustained moral effort on your own behalf. I mean, part of what you're doing, if you're a religious practitioner and you go and confess, is that you're trying to remind yourself about what lies you're telling. And
you might you're not always confessing about a lie. If you go to confession, you might be confessing about an action you took or an action you didn't take. Or maybe a truth that you told that really fucked some shit up because you shouldn't have fucking opened your goddamn mouth. Like, like it's actually that confession thing's like fairly open-ended, right?
You can stop doing it.
I think you can go in there and say anything, right?
I think so.
You can get good at what you practice.
Not anything. If you tell someone, if you tell a priest that like you're going to harm someone, they still have to like report that, right?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think a priest is a mandatory reporter, but I don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't know the answer to the question. So,
but like what I mean is, you can say anything. I could go in there and tell them, oh, I bought some food today and I felt like I was overpriced. That's a confession, right?
I suppose so.
Dickens process is, if you think about it, that we all do, right? People finding what the lies are that are holding them back and changing them right then and there with enough emotion. Question, Mary.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Thanks, Tony and Sage. I've heard you say, Dr. Peterson, and what I love about these stories of mythology and biblical stories is I've heard you say it de-isolates us and it gives us something that's like, wow, I'm not alone. A lot of people feel this way. And, hearing you explain this and sitting through some of the speakers that we've had earlier, I have the feeling that, wow, this world is continuing, like the chaos keeps coming. And it feels like overwhelming when I really think about the big picture of it sometimes and the complexity of it all and the things like, I will never understand this, whether it's financials or AI or all that the world is moving into, the dynamics of countries. I'm shaking just talking about it. I'm wondering, my experience is almost like there's these islands of order. I find that in my family. I find that in a safe community, mom and dad, friends.
Oh, mom and dad went with you to the Tony Robbins event. That's a fucking dysfunctional ass family.
I don't know if that's a woman's perspective of like, wow, there's a lot going on out there.
Whoa. That's women. Women always be fucking frazzled by the world around them. Bitches be
Men
frazzled.
Famously never frazzled.
By people and something that I understand. Is that a problem?
No, I think
representation?
I think you've got it.
He cut her off. He cut off everybody that asked a question. To be fair, she was rambling, but it's for him to decide that it's time for her to stop talking because she's rambling seems a bit silly.
Yes. He loves the sound of his own voice, though.
Right. I mean, first of all, it's inevitably the case that what would you say? You confront an infinite expanse of ignorance.
What even was the question again here?
There wasn't one.
Okay. So just the world seems big and frightening.
And the world is a complicated place, and sometimes the world is scary.
I feel
fine.
like she needs help from someone much better than Jordan Peterson.
Or maybe she's fine, and she's just like saying that sometimes the world is complicated and scary, and that's okay. Like that's the
Okay, yeah.
That would be the
If she feels like she needs help, though, she should get it from someone other than Jordan Peterson.
and definitely stop giving Tony Robbins money.
Yep.
Do you think anybody at this Tony Robbins event is there for free? I think not.
Fundamental way, things are always going to be ultimately beyond you. You see that in the biblical stories that insist, for example, that people can only see the back of God. And so it's an existential reality that there's going to be more
never heard
coming
that
at
before.
you than you can manage.
No, people can see the front of
and
God.
master. And then, of course, the question is, how do you deal
Adam
with
and
that?
Eve were
You deal
looking
with
God
that like a
face to
sailor
face.
deals with the ocean in
And
a
if
boat.
God is everywhere, like why everywhere you look, he's got his back turned to you. Seems like a dick.
You know, there's a lot of ocean, but you can stay afloat and you can navigate forward. And so then you might ask, well, how do you do that? Well, we talked about that a little bit today in terms of orienting stories. You know, you have to put forward some courage and some faith, and you have to confront the things that are obstacles in your path. And that attitude helps turn you into something that's united psychologically, right? That can strengthen you personally. But then there's the social element to that, because if we share the same story that we should confront chaos and make order, and we do that together, then now we have social unity around us. And that means that we have the strength of numbers. You know, part of the reason that I've been able to maneuver through the political turmoil that I've been mired in is because I have great family. They're very supportive. And I have a lot of friends who are tough people, and they were behind me. And I have a broader social community, and that fortifies me. And that's the kind of unity in numbers and in belief that does help you maintain your integrated spirit through the chaos of life. That's not weakness. That's a necessary observation that part of your sanity depends on the proper harmony you establish with a social community. Now, the female part of that might be that.
Uh-oh, here it comes. Here it comes.
Oh boy.
Here it comes.
The female locus of concentration is more local, right? And that and
The
more
female
familial.
locus of concentration is more local.
This is going to be one of those.
Okay. That makes no fucking sense. What even does that mean?
I think he's going to poorly explain it or not explain it at all.
Does he mean that women should be at home in the kitchen?
No. I would I'm gonna get emails about that one. What I think he might be
Does
saying
he mean
is,
that women shouldn't really worry themselves about the goings on of like states and countries and such?
I think he's not saying an ought, he's saying an is. I think he's saying that women tend to be more focused locally in their communities and not on global or national issues. I think he's saying an is, not an ought.
Okay, I disagree with him.
But that's not a bad thing. Someone has to bind the damn families together. And to some degree, we're islands unto ourselves, but to some degree, we're all members of family first and then community second. And it's not inappropriate
It's
at
like
all
the first and second dynamic of Scientology.
to make the family level of social integration a fundamental point of concern. And I do think that's the natural resting place of women, partly because they have to take care of infants and young children.
Okay, now he has gotten into the ought right there.
Yeah.
That statement was absolutely an ought statement.
Yeah.
That's the natural resting place of women to take care of the kids. That is fucked up.
You know who actually hates this guy? Is stay-at-home dads. They all hate him.
Well, I'm sure that he hates them too. So
What a weakness. It's just a difference of approach. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's a virtue. Now, it does mean that we still have to face the complex problem of how you integrate the integrated family in the broader community. And I would say that's a more masculine problem. What? That doesn't mean men and women can't address the same damn problem, but all things being equal, there's still a different level of natural concern. None of that's
This is like reading the Google memo.
Yeah.
When I counsel women, for example,
That guy sure went away quick.
Say, well, look, once you have a child, your fundamental.
I'm surprised Daily Wire didn't offer him millions of dollars.
Look, once you have a child, your fundamental concern should be your child. And that's true whether you're a father or a mother, but it's particularly true if you're a mother, especially if you have an infant. Then women will say, well, what do I do about my career? I feel guilty because
wait, hold on. Why wouldn't it be particularly true if you're the father of an infant?
It's because this is like his view on this is like very old and traditional and sexist.
Yeah.
Or I feel guilty.
Well, he'll say just absolutely fucking contradictory statements.
I feel guilty because I'm not pursuing my career, or I feel guilty when I'm pursuing my career that I'm not attending to my child. Women can be screwed both ways in that matter. I would say, well, look, it's perfectly reasonable for you to model successful adaptation to the broader social community for your kids. You have to get your act together.
This guy was like a psychologist or psychiatrist? Psychologist. Like he's supposed to like help people. And he's basically saying like women belong in the kitchen.
Yeah, I can't imagine like when he was in his clinical practice, I can't imagine too many women sticking with him for a very long time. If he was legitimately like saying these things in a clinical setting, which I'm a little bit skeptical of, actually.
I can imagine a lot of husbands forcing their wives to go see him. People like Steven Crowder.
Oh God, yeah. But I'm also kind of skeptical that this is what he would tell a patient, like a client or whatever. Even though he is kind of who he is, I'm just skeptical that when he was doing this stuff, that this is what he was saying.
Then you have to integrate you and your family in the broader community. You should be serving all of that simultaneously. That's a virtue. And women might approach that family first and broader social world second, and maybe men the other way around. It's a loose rule of thumb, but both of those approaches can work just fine, and they work great in tandem.
Beautiful. One more.
Dr. Peterson, thank you.
No, Tony, that was not beautiful. That was absolutely fucking despicable. That was a terrible answer. Fuck you, Jordan.
Beautiful. One more.
Dr. Peterson, thank you. The question I have for you is, there's a lot of chaos in the world, and I sometimes wonder what, or maybe have a hard time deciding what part of the chaos am I responsible for uniquely confronting. So Tony's very passionate about ending hunger, for example, with their billions of meals. And I have kind of racked my brain over time and not found that same kind of passion for a particular, cause like that. And I wonder how might a person, make that choice?
That's a great question. Well, I'll tell you a little story first.
God, of course. That's a great question. I'm not going to answer it at all. Fuck your question.
Worthwhile knowing. So it's a story from Exodus, and it's the story of the burning bush, which is kind of a mysterious story. And so
not about weed.
That story essentially goes. So Moses is trying to find.
Yeah, it's actually not very mysterious. Like Moses was almost definitely on drugs.
Yeah.
Off wandering down a pathway, minding his own business one day, and something attracts his attention. It sort of glitters and glimmers off to the side, and it pulls him towards it. Now he has to decide to step off the path and go investigate. The story makes that quite clear. And this is a burning bush, not a burning forest. It's
not yet.
It's not so overwhelming that.
How do you think a forest fire starts, Jordan?
All right. And so Moses goes and decides he's going to go investigate this thing that captures his interest. And as he gets closer to it, he starts to hear a divine voice. And the first thing the voice tells him as he gets closer is that he's on sacred ground and that he should take off his shoes. And then he starts to interact with this.
A divine voice would say, hey, there's a bush on fire. You should probably get out of the forest.
Phenomenon, this burning bush. And God himself reveals his name to Moses. So what does that mean? Well, here's one thing it means. Lots of things grip our interest and not really of our own accord, right? You can't really pick what you're interested in. It picks you. Now, you can pick whether or not you pursue it or not, and you can pick how diligently you pursue it. But the interest itself manifests itself in a kind of autonomous manner. Now, you might ask yourself, well, what would happen if you really pursued what gripped your interest? And the answer is, well, you get deeper and deeper into it. And the deeper you get into something, the more you're beginning to tread on sacred ground, because there's no difference between sacred and deep. It's the same idea. And the idea in the burning bush story is that if you attend to what compels your interest with enough diligence, the nature of being itself will reveal itself to you. And that's true.
So
you might say,
what I'm taking away from this is that if I am very interested in speedrunning Super Mario Brothers for the original Nintendo, I should do that to find God.
Stay up long
Keep
enough.
doing that every day, and eventually God will start talking to me.
Drink enough Red Bull, you might.
Hey, well, how does that burning bush appear then in the confines of normal life? And I would say it appears in two ways. It appears in the guise of what interests
Nintendo.
And it appears in the guise of what
Super Mario
sets itself before you as a problem. So I would say,
the
as a
speedrunning
starter,
part.
you can try this. Do this over a couple of days. Write down what bothers you.
Oh, right now, I don't have. There's not enough paper in the world right now, Jordy Pete.
About
I mean, he would be on the list at the top.
About the details of your personal life, your relationships with other people that bother you. Now, a million things could bother you, and some things do. Those are your problems. And your destiny is in your problems. And then I would also say, well, watch yourself for a couple of weeks and see what you're doing when what you're doing appears meaningful, right? When your interest is gripped and you're compelled. Because when you're in the place where you are, when your interest is compelled and you're gripped, you're where you should be. And one of the things you want to learn is how to be there more. You have to kind of treat yourself like a stranger to figure that out because, well, as you said, you haven't been able to find your path precisely. Well, that means you don't know who the hell you are. Well, that's what it means fundamentally. You may know some things about yourself, but you don't know yourself as deeply as you might. You have to understand that there's a certain degree of arbitrary strangeness about you and about the things that will compel you and grip you. And you need to discover what those are. And paying attention can help. It's like,
right, one, we're over time, and two, I can't take it anymore.
I do believe, though, that he is right, that the more you try to speed run Super Mario Brothers for the original Nintendo Entertainment System, the closer you will be to God. So if that's your goal, you should spend all day speedrunning.
That was the worst interview I've ever seen.
Was it even an interview? He didn't even ask any questions.
Well,
doesn't there have to be a question for it to be an interview?
The audience made some quest statements.
Yeah, I think only the last guy actually asked a question, and he didn't even fucking answer it. He was like, "Let me tell you about Moses instead."
He did kind of say to write down things that are bothering you. I suppose he meant to take an inventory of what you think you can change about the world. If I'm going to be charitable to this guy, which whatever. Everybody gets one. Everybody gets one a show. Or no, you get one a show where Dave tries to be charitable to you. I was expecting, first of all, something more entertaining. I was expecting to get a better episode of the podcast out of this interview. Honestly, I was sort of expecting to hear more of like that grind set shit and like listen to Jordy Pete explain why the grind set is good or some shit like that. But the questions were from the audience and it was like a monologue. Wasn't great. Not the best episode of the Intellectual Dollar Tree, and probably not the best episode of Tony Robbins' podcast either.
That whole first part where Jordan was just talking nonstop for like, what, 25 minutes, 30 minutes?
3 days.
Like that, all of the actual advice that he gave, which essentially he said nothing, but in some parts he bordered on what you would consider advice, and it was fucking terrible. You should prepare for things. Like, maybe don't let your fears control your life, but also like don't just decide that whatever fear you have, you're just going to try and overcome it immediately. Like, if you're afraid of heights, maybe put on a parachute before you jump out of a plane.
Right. Or don't go straight to skydiving.
Yeah, maybe that too.
Try a ladder. But that's a fear of ladders is distinct from fear of heights. I hate ladders, but I'm not afraid of heights. But I don't want to get into ladders and heights and that kind of stuff. Although I feel like it would be a much more interesting conversation than the thing we just watched, which was a very low bar to clear. I was gonna say there's no takeaway from this. That was stupid. That sucked. I hope the post game is better than the fucking show. We're gonna go ahead and give the episode out as a freebie on Patreon, by the way, for people if they want to get it. And because like I feel like people are just, if they've listened this far, they've really been ripped off, honestly. So your time is worth something, and I'm sorry to have wasted it in this way. If you listened at 2x, the show isn't free for you. But if you listened at 1x, you can go to patreon.com/echoplex and get the post game for free, which should be more a good would be the word I'm looking for. HK, you want to read the show out?
Yes, I do. Thank you for joining us. This has been the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you would like to see any of our other shows, you can find out information all about them at echoplexmedia.com. And if you'd like to support us, you can do that in one of two places. You can do it at patreon.com/Echoplex, or you can do it at eplex.store. If you're listening live, stick around so that after the song, you can hear the post game. And if you're listening on the podcast, like Dave said, the post game for this show will be available on the Patreon. And now this is Boomers by Periscope.
You recall
Like what we're doing here at Echoplex Media? Well, head on over to echoplexmedia.com/support. There are a bunch of great ways to support this project. My favorite always is the merch.